were created by de-dollarization, a professional in the field. Hello, in the studio with Mikhail Khazin. Let's start the economy Russian style. Today, I'm in the studio alone, and we are going to have a conversation about a tremendously important, I would say extremely timely topic that has really made itself known and garnered significant attention in the past few days. Enough to mention the famous, accordingly, the security conference in the city of Munich, which showed itself in all its glory and in general looked, I would say, a bit wild. So you know what that signifies. But that is not all, because if you examine the same picture, if you observe what the leaders of the European Union are expressing, if you observe what the leaders of the United States of America are expressing, not only about us, but also about each other, then, in general, it becomes completely evident that they are in a very peculiar state. The term hysteria, which I mentioned in the title of our program today, is more or less accurate in describing the phenomenon we are discussing, because no, it is not just about comprehending what to do. There is also a clear comprehension that time is rapidly running out in a terrifyingly fast manner. To implement necessary measures, Borrell, during the security conference, emphasized the urgent need to stop engaging in mere discussions, and instead take concrete actions to address the situation at hand. He highlighted the importance of moving beyond words and initiating tangible steps towards resolving the issue. I am unable to refrain from recollecting a remarkable narrative from the White Sea Biological Station of Moscow State University in my memory. The members of the squad were seated in their small house, which is called Teremok. Teremok is the name of their cozy little dwelling. And for approximately 2.5 hours, we were discussing that we should get up and go to the woods. Let's go mushroom and berry picking. So there were constantly phrases like, well, that's it, let's get up and go. No, well, we need to finally get it together. Just 5 more minutes and we'll go, and so on and so forth. I'll say it again, 2.5 hours. And in this situation, it was absolutely clear. Forest, mushrooms, everything's good. It was there, if memory serves me right. In August, there were a lot of mushrooms. The existing situation that our former partners find themselves in appears significantly more unfavorable and challenging today compared to the previous days. And here's why. In the end, you can go mushroom picking today, you can go tomorrow, or you can go in a week. Because mushrooms, of course, the ones that are available now, will rot in a week, but new ones will grow. However, the situation with our partners is entirely different. I will tell you more or less about it in detail. Provide me with all the details. However, the crucial aspect is that there is a lack of time. So, the level of tension is constantly escalating. Just the other day, the Houthis finally sank their very first ship in the Red Sea, marking a significant escalation of the conflict. And there is absolutely no doubt that they will undoubtedly have plenty of other opportunities to definitely sink something. And it's beneficial if it's a type of dry cargo vessel or another type, a ship designed for transporting containers. However, if the ship is of military nature, the situation will be significantly more dire for all parties concerned, as it will be evident to everyone that a vessel on the ocean is not just a presence of military personnel, but also a potential objective. Well, you see, in the Black Sea, we witnessed firsthand that the party who has control over the coastlines of the Black Sea is capable of guaranteeing a naval environment devoid of military vessels due to the presence of rockets penetrating the area. Do I need to explain that the Red Sea is already redder than the Black Sea? Besides, there's one more thing. As we are aware, drones have commenced flying over American bases in Iraq, and it is highly likely that the United States will withdraw from Iraq, just like they did from Syria, and in general, close down many bases in the Middle East. However, who has stated that these very same drones are incapable of flying over the U.S. base in Bahrain or Qatar, or, I am not even afraid to say it, in Germany for that matter? What is the message you are trying to convey? that there are no unmanned aerial vehicles in the European Union. So you're stating that each military base within the United States possesses a comprehensive air defense system? So, in order to overload this system, how many drones do you need? What is currently happening? Please provide an update. 200? How much does each one cost? $50? $100? All right, do you understand? Therefore, with a payment of $20,000, you will be able to enjoy a wonderful experience, observing things detonate at American military installations in Germany or a similar location. Noting that in April of the 23rd year, me and Korina Alexandrovna Gevorgyan were discussing the overall situation that had developed at that time in the world. And we came to the conclusion that the conflict between London and Washington had reached a stage where pro-London forces in Europe could potentially spark a powerful Islamic uprising in Western Europe, with attacks on American military bases. This uprising had the potential to be quite significant and could pose a serious threat to the stability of the region. It was imperative for both London and Washington to take immediate action to prevent further escalation and mitigate the risk of widespread violence. At that point, it was fine. However, who is the one who said that this particular situation cannot happen again in the future? And who is the one who said that only London is the sole place that has the ability to handle this kind of operation? And at the present time, in a general sense, it is quite obvious to everyone that it is similar in nature. By the conclusion of spring, there will be an opportunity, and by the season of autumn, there will be a significant likelihood, merely because there is a multitude of questions stacking up that necessitate answers. But there are no responses or solutions available at present. And all individuals who require responses, including those that are convenient for them, will motivate and encourage those individuals who, in theory, should provide these responses today to take immediate action and do something about it. To furnish an item or object to an individual as a representation or case in point, serving as an illustration or demonstration of the concept being discussed. All right, at this moment, it is time to actually have a discussion and delve into the specific details. Economy, global economy, economy of the United States of America. So in the fall of 21, a structural crisis began, which is leading to a decline in the real sector of the economy. The United States of America is masking this crisis in various ways, such as reducing inflation, which is a typical approach, and turning towards the growth of capitalization of financial assets in Europe. So in other words, there doesn't seem to be a decline in numbers in the United States of America. Moreover, they showed quite a significant growth there at the end of the 23rd year. But a whole bunch of indirect indicators came out in December, when inflation was supposed to fall, according to the assumptions of the leadership of the Federal Reserve System of the USA and the U.S. Treasury, that is, the monetary authorities. And she didn't fall. In January, it became clear that she started to grow. The data was made available to the public last week, and you can find the specific details in the comprehensive macroeconomic reviews that have been published by the Khazin Fund. Moreover, there exists an additional unpleasant situation that is truly grave, and this situation is exceedingly serious. On the lower levels of technological chains, specifically where the initial components are located, there is an observable trend of increasing deflation, which is causing a significant impact on the economy and raising concerns among experts in the field. So in other words, the real sector, the industrial sector of the United States of America, is declining. And to top it off, the total sales volume in the United States of America took a nosedive. Yes, that might be a local issue. Yes, it could be due to the limited cleaning activities during the thinning of the season in January. They may have made an error. Let's verify the data. February month. But nevertheless, all this together speaks to the fact that the crisis in the United States of America continues. Well, yeah. And accordingly, the reduction in the length of the work week sharply in December month. Let's see, like what happened in January? A little later, taking into account that in December, January, due to the holidays, there might have been some different shenanigans. Let's look at the February data in March. But altogether, if there was one indicator, we could argue. Altogether, they demonstrate the identical thing. This here crisis that has been occurring in the United States of America for more than 2 years, it doesn't stop, as it should be for a structural crisis. And most importantly, despite the support of private demand, the standard of living of the population has already started to decline. Additionally, it is important to mention that the method through which the economy in the United States of America is stimulated following the COVID crisis has now become identical to the approach used in Russia during the years 1996 to 1998. In other words, the budget extracts money from the entire economy, utilizing the increasing deficit to fund expenses and stimulate household spending. This process of sucking money out of the economy and using the growing deficit for financing serves the dual purpose of covering expenses and providing a stimulus to spending, impacting the economic landscape with its budgetary measures. The problem is that in the economy, the amount of available money is becoming increasingly smaller, but these funds still continue to flow into the stock market, where a uniquely large and concerning bubble has been inflated to an alarming extent. In other words, we're in for a repeat of 2008, but on a larger scale. The more, the merrier. On a grand scale. Additionally, the degree of economic development is significantly lower. Basically, there's only one mechanism working in it, and if the budget starts having problems, everything will start falling apart. If you lend your support to the budget by implementing emission measures, then the rate of inflation will skyrocket rapidly and uncontrollably. Just so you are aware, the Federal Reserve of the United States has not been increasing interest rates for the previous 6 months. The process of inflation has already begun to increase. Therefore, the main objective is not to decrease the rate of inflation. The point is that we need to take it to the next level. But in the midst of a plummeting economy, raising rates is just some kind of nonsense. What is the move? You cannot do anything. And the crisis is still ongoing. And it is not very clear what steps to take in order to address it effectively. In the European Union, it's even worse because amidst all this stuff, which is completely identical to the United States of America, they have also deprived themselves of access to cheap energy resources. As a result, a significant part of the industry, which used to bring in high added value, like chemistry, is closing down in Germany and in the European Union as a whole. Well, and accordingly, the pace of decline is even higher than in the United States of America. Well, maybe it's just that in the European Union, they tell a little more truth. This is because if the United States of America has a unified statistical system, then in the European Union, there are still separate statistical bureaus in individual countries that are obliged to concentrate on their own political problems within the country, which is not the case in the USA, where a unified system allows for a more coordinated approach. That is the reason why the truth tends to come to the surface with greater frequency and regularity. And now take a look at this. We have been working on it for a total of 40 hours. Over the course of several decades, well, almost half a century, there existed a certain model of economic management that naturally and inherently shaped the political management system to its liking and preferences, exerting a profound and lasting influence over the trajectory of governance and policymaking, leaving an indelible mark on the socio-economic landscape of that era. However, that is understandable. Do not provoke trouble while it is quiet, as no politician will risk disrupting a functioning economic model until it becomes evident to all people that this specific model is no longer operating effectively. All efforts to discuss the fact that this model has begun to experience some minor issues usually end up having negative consequences for politicians involved in the conversation. We are familiar with this from the example of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. I was employed in the 1980s, specifically in the late 1980s, at the Institute of Statistics and Economic Research of Goskomstadt during the time of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Well, this name is already Russian, but prior to that, it had a different name it was known by in the past. And in accordance with that, while going through the process, They informed me that the previous statistics pertaining to the Soviets had made an effort to calculate the actual rate of growth in the USSR during the early 1980s. And they arrived at the conclusion that approximately during the years 82 and 83, the rate of growth reached a value of 0. Let's mention that in the USA, zero growth rates happened much earlier in time compared to other nations around the world. Everything after that is just artificially stimulated. So, here's the thing. If you printed money and as a result your real sector experienced growth, is that considered positive or negative in terms of its impact? Because if the economy adjusts to the need to constantly receive all new and freshly printed money, it will all end in a big mess and create a chaotic situation that will have far-reaching consequences for the financial system and the overall stability of the economy. In the USSR, they started printing money already in the late 80s. And prior to that, there was this imitation of rapid growth that had occurred and was being observed. Let's make a note that, Andropov has already arrived at the economic growth that has been stalled due to various factors and challenges. And he already comprehended that everything was not good. However, the management system was constructed for a relatively high level of growth. And the people who were in charge of the system at that time came when growth rates of 7 to 8% per year were considered normal. And those individuals who were genuinely old, such as Baibakov, still retained vivid recollections of the remarkable 12% economic growth that had taken place during that particular period of time.
And this situation undergoes a radical transformation, which significantly alters the circumstances and prospects for political leaders. They are faced with a choice between two alternatives.
The first option starts ringing the bell and shouting, guys, look, there was a 15% economic growth in 51, 52. In the 60s it became 12, in the 70s it became 8, in the 80s it became 2. The economy is slowing sharply. We need to take action. I'll mention that in the USSR, by the way, there were 2 reforms attempting to solve this problem. The first one was made by Khrushchev in the early 60s. She was initially a hot mess. And the second one is the Kosygin reform that occurred in the 1960s. She ultimately turned out to be a flop as well, but a significant portion of her failure can be attributed to the fact that Kosygin was a cocky guy who had an intense and unwavering hatred for negotiating with anyone, regardless of the circumstances or the individuals involved. As those individuals who were witnesses observed, if he had attended the agreements with the secretaries of the regional committees, he might have advanced it. So they became the opposition, and as they had the majority in the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, they essentially emerged as the winners. Here you go. The situation in the Western region today is identical to before, with no observed changes or differences compared to the past. The individuals presently holding positions of power, who are 60 years old, began their involvement in politics in the 80s, during the Reaganomics period, characterized by a sharp growth in the economy. And they did not witness any emission pumping because they were not provided with information or instruction about it. It's not that they were concealing it, but rather that they simply did not talk about it openly or bring it up in conversation. And they witnessed the triumph of the Western powers in the year 1991. And they experienced this sensation like, here it is, happiness, that they must persist with this course because it has resulted in success on 2 occasions. The liberal economic theory fails to acknowledge the crises that occurred during that period, and there were multiple instances of such crises. And most importantly, they do not comprehend the specifics of the crisis of capital efficiency decline, which in actuality was described in the book Memories of the Future, a publication that was released in the year 2019. In the book The Empire's Sunset Dollars and the End of Pax Americano, which we wrote with Andrei Kobyakov in 2002, it was published in 2003. The mechanism of crisis and correspondingly structural changes was described in detail, but it was not highlighted or given sufficient emphasis to fully convey its significance and potential impact. There was no economic theory present, It was simply a description of how it is set up. This book, of course, went unnoticed in the Western countries, and as a result, there are absolutely no people who would have the understanding of how it all works and operates in the context of the economy. Furthermore, given the highly totalitarian structure of scientific schools, they are absolutely convinced that anyone who holds alternative views must be destroyed, preferably through physical means. As a result, due to the significant amount of funding they receive from financial institutions and instruments, as well as their unwavering support for the political line on expanding the Western sphere of influence, there is currently no viable alternative to them in the West. These schools have been allocated quite a large amount of money, which further solidifies their position of dominance. Consequently, alternative perspectives are effectively suppressed within the scientific community, and there is a lack of diversity in the prevailing scientific discourse. All endeavors to engage in discussions regarding the logic that we have been presenting for a span of 25 years have consistently been impeded by official economic institutions, leaving us unable to effectively communicate our ideas and findings to a wider audience. In recent years, the situation has only just begun to change slightly, and in the Western region, it is an absolute disaster, I'm telling you. And what is interesting, she possesses a propagandistic character. Because, for instance, we are consistently referred to as conspiracy theorists, since conspiracy theorists is a derogatory term, and they kind of formulate and make various accusations and charges against us on a regular basis, all the time without any substantial evidence. The humorous aspect of it is that they have a tendency to frequently contradict the things we say, which can be quite amusing. However, the key is that it is not possible to read our true thoughts or opinions in that context. Consequently, the individuals in question resort to composing generalized texts, which subsequently become commonly cited as a source by others. And when you encounter individuals to whom you make a statement in that place, they respond, "But you made this statement.
Where did you obtain that? Well, in what other manner?
Here's what it says.
Apologies, what is the relevance of this to me? Did I compose this text?
Why are you asking me? So you're asking these people what this means. By the way, this is actually pretty funny, because a couple of times in the past few years, when irresponsible journalists asked me about the conflict between the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, I honestly asked them, who are the Rothschilds and who are the Rockefellers?
In your understanding, what made you feel some kind of gut feeling? He says, you wrote about it, didn't you?
Where? I am in possession of a book titled Crisis and Power, co-authored with Sergei Sheglov, which was published last year. The second volume of the book contains case studies on the theory of power, including a story about the Rockefeller family based on American biographical sources. However, it is important to note that this story specifically focuses on the family and their dynamics. The book provides valuable insights into the concept of power and its manifestations in different contexts. Regarding the Rothschilds, I have hardly written anything about them in my work. There is very little information available on this subject. I am somewhat of an authority on the lifestyle of the Rothschild family. If we are discussing their involvement in power, then once again I am writing about global projects, not specifically about separate elite groups that exist within the framework of these projects or any other similar projects around the world. Therefore, to summarize, it can be stated that we are able to perceive the existence of a remarkably influential propaganda machine that lends support to an inadequate economic theory and economic model, which continues to be relevant and applicable in the context of today's world and its complexities. And in this context, those individuals who are actively involved in public affairs, namely politicians, as well as public experts like leaders of central banks or similar positions, find themselves in an incredibly arduous and demanding position due to the fact that they are being asked specific questions, which adds to the complexity of their situation and the challenges they face in effectively navigating through it. And there is no response to these inquiries. They simply do not exist within the framework of the current liberal economic theory that is widely accepted. And this is precisely the juncture where things start to get incredibly fascinating. Because with a growing frequency, an ever-increasing number of individuals from that particular place begin to approach us, seeking guidance on what actions to take moving forward. Certainly, these are individuals who do not hold any official positions of authority or power within the organization. And to whom can I provide answers? Gentlemen, why does it matter to you what course of action to take? If you are unable to validate this knowledge within the framework of established institutions of authority in the Western context, you are placing yourself in a position of a certain type of extremely limited group, which, even if it possesses the knowledge, is unable to articulate it verbally due to various constraints and restrictions. All of our theory, as viewed from the standpoint of official liberal science, is nothing more than a bunch of conspiracy nonsense, some kind of esoteric stuff that is considered to be obscure or mysterious. And paying attention to fascinating tales in scientific auditoriums or even on specific official political forums with an economic undertone. That is a big no-no. That is absolutely forbidden and strictly prohibited. It is highly discouraged to listen to such stories as they can have serious consequences. Therefore, it is strongly advised to avoid engaging in such discussions or forums. How do you intend to share this knowledge with the public? What methods will you use to ensure that this information reaches a wide audience and has a meaningful impact in the field? I feel improved. Here in Russia, I simply know with certainty who you can communicate with and who you cannot. I personally know a significant portion of these people, and for this reason, I have some ideas about what is acceptable and what is not. Oh, and naturally, I have no knowledge of anyone in that place. All right, you are acquainted with someone, but you know. I am just informing you about individual components. I have the ability to respond to any inquiry without any difficulty. Well, okay, nearly any option will suffice for our needs, especially if there's time to think. And how about you? You ask me a specific question, I give you a specific answer. If you start this response, if you openly express your thoughts, they will accuse you of committing every imaginable sin. If I were to articulate that viewpoint, I could systematically dismantle the arguments of the accusers, as my position is intricately layered and richly nuanced. By my, in this particular case, I am referring to all those individuals who are currently engaged in writing the new economic theory in our country at the present time. So, what are your capabilities then? So, in other words, for a significantly protracted duration, spanning over the course of 2 generations, the unwavering dominance of one fundamental paradigm, predicated upon a single, let's say, not entirely accurate scientific theory, has resulted in the undeniable reality that the sole means of effecting change within the present model is to utterly dismantle this paradigm and incorporate individuals who are entirely detached from it. This has engendered a circumstance wherein any alterations to the existing framework can solely be accomplished through the complete eradication of the prevailing paradigm and the integration of individuals who possess no association with it whatsoever. The matter of where to obtain them is a whole different story. Moreover, it's crucial not to overlook that within this paradigm, a substantial number of very wealthy individuals have emerged and become prominent in the scene. The number of them, as well as their wealth, continue to grow constantly because the emission mechanism has not gone anywhere and is still in place. If you want to make a change, you're going to have to eliminate these individuals. Not because you desire to personally shoot each and every one of them, incarcerate them, or engage in any other form of retribution, but rather due to the fact that the instrument facilitating these imaginary riches, which are linked to the capitalization of fictional assets, will cease to operate and become non-functional. And as a result, all these riches will disappear on you. As a consequence, the quantity of affluent individuals whose fortunes are connected to the financial market will diminish. Well, we have already performed the calculation and determined that it will be somewhere in the range of 15, 20, 30 times. But in reality, it should be reduced by 15 in the end. In life, the pendulum always swings back to equilibrium. So the number of affluent individuals will decrease by a factor of 30, and then even further, indicating that out of a total of 100, only 3 will persist, and subsequently, an additional 3 new ones will emerge. In the end, there will be around 5, 6 left. 100. This is an authentic situation. It is utterly impossible to adequately explain her in words alone. You know, individuals who are accustomed to flying on private planes, even though they contribute to air pollution with carbon dioxide and other emissions, it is extremely challenging to explain to them that they will have to utilize the subway for transportation. Absolutely not, Jose. The problem is not just that he will not believe it, but the real issue lies in the fact that his entire way of thinking simply does not allow for the possibility of accepting such information as true. So he will behave as though the plane will remain in place indefinitely. Yes, certainly, when he does not have it and does not have anything else, and he will have to take the subway, then he will change his psychology a great deal, but that will be later. And besides, let's not forget that behind each of these people, there is a huge amount of all sorts of hangers-on,
who is even more ready to defend their capabilities, because they know perfectly well that if this very person somehow managed to get this money, let's not say that he earned it, because the word earn has a slightly different meaning and is associated with labor, not with power mechanisms. And these people are completely unclear.
So they must go to someone who will provide them with something in exchange. However, they certainly know how to do it correctly in that specific location. To please the boss, you must reduce the number of owners by 15 times. As a result, the number of Q will be decreased by an amount proportional to this reduction in owners. The lines are much longer than the owners. So we're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who will decide to do it all, and without any chance of restoring their status. And they will fight very fiercely. So any attempt to come up to a person who will suggest changing this situation, they'll just roll him into the asphalt right away. Maintaining any expectations for reforms to commence from any location in the western part of the world that will ultimately bring about a significant change in the current situation is an extremely naive perspective to hold. It is not possible that among the present Western politicians there will emerge individuals who have a desire for a distinct model and over time gradually assume their positions, thereby replacing the existing politicians and bringing about a transformation in the political landscape. Because under an alternative approach, the total count of individuals who will receive benefits will be significantly smaller than before. And because of this, they won't permit those individuals who will drive this specific model to go anywhere at all. What does this mean in terms of the future? This signifies that initially, there must be a comprehensive collapse accompanied by absolute destruction. And at that point, everything will begin to sprout and emerge, signaling the start of a new phase filled with growth and potential. By the way, let's make a note of a highly interesting thing. By the way, I have 2 examples in my possession here. An example of a radical shift in paradigm is the transition from the late ancient society of the Roman Empire to a completely different socio-political landscape. A kingdom located in a time period ranging from the 4th to the 7th centuries AD, characterized by a gloomy and dark atmosphere reminiscent of the Middle Ages. I would like to bring your attention to the fact that there has never been a situation in which any portion of the Roman elite has been able to successfully implement a reform. The barbarians were supposed to come, they were supposed to destroy everything. And then, later on, in this very spot, a whole new civilization started to grow. Just a reminder, the industrial might of the Roman Empire actually didn't fully recover in various sectors until the 16th, the 18th centuries, which is like a whopping 1,500 years later. However, during the 16th century, when the feudal model was being replaced by the capitalist one, there was no existence of any such thing or concept as such thing. Why? Because a substantial proportion of the new capitalist elite is comprised of individuals who were born and raised within the feudal elite. Yes, certainly not all of the feudal lords were able to adjust to the new way of life, but a large number of them were successful in doing so. Why? Because the new model offered higher labor productivity, which resulted in an increase in efficiency, and accordingly, There was no disappearance or loss of the previous elite group or class of individuals. At this moment, it seems highly likely that we will encounter a situation resembling that of the late Roman Empire. So there will be a substantial decline in the standard of living. Well, according to various estimates in the Western countries, it will be twice as much, maybe even 60% of the current level. According to modern standards, especially if we consider urban life, it will result in total poverty. The population will be struggling. I cannot say for sure, because it requires a very deep understanding of the internal social psychology of Western society. The impact on people's lives will be significant, and they will face immense challenges in maintaining their well-being and basic needs amidst this drastic decrease in living standards. In different countries, it will be done differently. I don't rule out the possibility that in some countries, especially in Europe, immigrants will come to power, for whom a low standard of living is the norm, and who simply won't let the white urban population move, so to speak. It will be dispersed, declassified, partially destroyed. Well, then do whatever you want. In any case, there won't be a gradual transition from one model to another, as it won't happen smoothly or gradually. Hence, in the context of Russia, such a transition occurred, marking a significant change in its historical path. Yes, there was a decline in the standard of living in the 1990s, but nonetheless, the old elite kind of remained in existence and didn't completely disappear. I believe I have already discussed this topic on numerous occasions. Practically all of the oligarchs from the initial wave, in one way or another, through, for example, intricate connections, were distantly related to the members of the Politburo, with the exception of one individual, Berezovsky. And that is why, in general, there was not such a terrible collapse of the magnitude that was initially feared and anticipated. However, in the context of Western society, this particular time will be distinct and unlike any previous instances we have encountered. And that is the reason why present-day politicians are in a state of extreme hysteria and panic as they face the challenges and pressures of the modern political landscape. In view of the complete lack of alternatives, they are compelled to assume the position of performers within this exceedingly open-minded paradigm, as there is simply no other choice available to them in this particular situation. They do not possess any genuine levers of power. The individuals who appoint them and who oversee them, but who do not directly engage in management themselves, are constantly engaged in arguments and demands, insisting that some form of action be taken in response. Essentially, at this location, we heard Burrell, who was loudly shouting, "We need immediate action." No way, Jose. And as a result of this, the level of internal tension keeps on increasing all the time, without any signs of abating or diminishing. An increasing number of them are beginning to focus solely on one thing, the method of discreetly escaping. A number of individuals who already possess clearly exposed corrupt stories can be found among various political figures of the European Union, including deputies and others. However, it is important to note that not all of these individuals have been brought to light yet. Some remain hidden beneath the surface, while others have already been deeply buried, and their stories remain untold. For some, it is necessary to keep their positions in order not to impoverish them. Certain individuals attempt to retain their positions due to the accompanying benefits, such as the ability to travel on an aircraft without charge or some other form of advantage. Breathe as if in the villas of their sponsors, supposedly just visiting, and so on and so forth, and similar things and such like and the like and whatnot and all that jazz. However, on the whole, as time goes on, it is starting to feel more and more like we are constantly in a state of needing to run and keep moving forward. What was the reason for the substantial audience turnout for Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson on his show? Is it more significant than the final of the Super Bowl? And I will provide an answer in response to that inquiry. Because for a normal person, for an ordinary person, including an American, this feeling of hopelessness in the current situation is very strong. Essentially, the typical person can observe that the fundamental components of existence are deteriorating. He doesn't get it, like he doesn't understand why, he doesn't know how, he doesn't know what to do, but he saw that they're falling apart, and he is unable to help but observe that in Russia, these fundamental elements, even if they may be different, are not being destroyed as is the case in Western nations, but rather they are being strengthened and reinforced. This is truly crucial, critical stuff. For them, Putin is like a symbol of being able to pursue a certain kind of politics that doesn't lead to this total catastrophe, you know? It's of great importance to them. The significance cannot be overstated. Putin represents a vision of politics that avoids the potential for a complete and utter disaster, if you catch my drift. Once more, they do not comprehend what sets Russia apart. They lack understanding of Russia's terrible decline from overconsumption in the 1990s, which distinguishes it from other countries. However, they observe that Russia is distinct from China or Iran in terms of its characteristics and behavior. This is not an Islamic state, and it certainly is not a Chinese one either. Additionally, they have a strong belief that Russia has comprehended something that enables it to overcome this crisis. And the fact is, perhaps Putin will say, or at the very least, the way we will feel about it. It is a gut feeling, and each and every one of us has personally witnessed it. It is an experience that is widely shared among all of us. So, it frequently occurs that, in intense situations, well, I have observed this happen when individuals embark on hikes or venture to other locations, and suddenly unforeseen circumstances arise out of the blue. And at that moment, out of nowhere, this guy, who usually never wants to go anywhere, not as a leader or anywhere else, suddenly pops up and starts explaining what needs to be done, and everyone starts following him. Various options exist. Person may have expertise but not inclined to boss others, or uninterested in leadership currently, or already fulfilled commanding roles and no longer finds it engaging, and so on and so forth. But it's precisely this situation that boosts both Russia's and Putin's ratings worldwide. Contrary to the narrative being pushed in the Western world, but among everyday people, it is a different story and perspective. Once individuals start earning even a minimal income from the basic liberal paradigm, their attention turns to Russia and Putin, whom they perceive as a destructive factor. The belief in the detrimental influence of Russia and Putin becomes ingrained in their mindset, as they are seen as posing a significant threat to society and its well-being. You know, it is truly challenging to envision a model losing their life in such circumstances. Individuals are inherently inclined to consistently attempt to locate someone to hold accountable. And that is precisely why a large number of individuals, actually the vast majority, commence searching and contemplating who is responsible. Well, I've got two thoughts. So Putin initially expressed it in an interview with Tucker Carlson. He expressed that the guys merely have an unlucky manager who was incapable of handling the situation effectively. The person who was unable to pull you out. Well, yes, that is true, but not entirely. There were other factors at play. The managers were unable to save the situation within this paradigm, indicating their inability to do so in the sense that they lacked the necessary means or strategies. In principle, that's impossible. That is not their entitlement. It simply was not within the scope of their expertise. Perhaps other managers, such as Richard Nixon during the late 1960s and early 1970s, could have potentially mitigated the consequences for the people affected by their decisions and actions. But I have no doubt that if they threw Nixon off in the early 70s, they would throw off such a Nixon even faster now, considering that those who rule today have much more money through emission in the United States of America. Another matter is that maintaining the system requires even more money than they can print, but they have money up the wazoo to solve local issues. And for this reason, here's this answer. Even though it satisfies the average American that management isn't worth a damn, but nevertheless, the second answer is that the enemies are to blame. Right now, there's an attempt to explain that the enemies are to blame. The enemies are Putin, Iran, the Houthis, and there are some other forces that are trying to disrupt and spoil everything there. Here's a very interesting point, by the way, because why does Putin always talk about peace, friendship, and something else? Because he's explaining that you guys are accusing me of being a destroyer, but you yourselves don't follow the agreement. So it's important to recognize the role of these external forces and the impact they have on the situation. This is a crucial aspect that cannot be overlooked. It is imperative to understand the significance of these external actors and the influence they wield in this context. I have offered you once, offered you twice, offered you 3 times, offered you 4 times. Your managers have consistently refused to go along with the agreement. Maybe it's because they're lousy managers and miscalculated that the benefit of not having an agreement is greater than having an agreement. Perhaps it is because they are such poor managers that they do not know how to handle the situation in a manner that is mutually agreed upon. Well, and then, if there exist agreements, there is no adversary. Then it becomes evident right away that they are the ones to blame for everything that is going wrong at the moment. Now, that is a political moment, and similar to any political moment, it is primarily psychological in nature, driven by the complexities and dynamics of the political landscape. These individuals absolutely do not desire to be accused of being at fault for anything themselves, as they are determined to avoid any responsibility or blame. Anyone but them. But underneath that, of course, there's usually a mercenary interest, but sometimes it's also a psychological one. I am all great and stuff, and then out of nowhere, some random trash accuses me of being a bad manager, which is completely unjustified and really frustrating for me. So I do not rule out the possibility that this tough attitude towards Russia in recent years is not only related to the fact that the objective situation requires certain actions from the politicians of Western countries that they are unable to take due to a range of constraints and limitations, including geopolitical considerations, domestic political dynamics, and diplomatic complexities. And that's why they're trying to shift the blame onto someone else. But also because there is a purely personal interest. Due to the fact that any agreement places the responsibility solely on them as individuals personally, the primary goal at hand is to unquestionably avoid any form of guilt or wrongdoing, ensuring complete innocence and a clear conscience throughout the entire process of the task at hand. And where does this lead? So, as the situation worsens, and I have already stated that a structural crisis has commenced, there are no remaining resources to halt it. Attempts to attribute everything to objective narratives like COVID have been unsuccessful. And in this particular circumstance, it is completely unclear how one can maintain innocence and avoid blame for the unfolding crisis that is devoid of any available means to be mitigated or resolved. The failure to assign responsibility and find effective solutions in this dire situation only exacerbates the gravity of the ongoing crisis. And that is the reason why politicians from Western countries, whether they are from the European Union, the United States of America, or other smaller regions, start to have some serious meltdowns and face challenges that are hard to handle. That is the underlying reason why, in the present day, we find ourselves unable to engage in a meaningful conversation, let alone effectively negotiate and come to any sort of agreement or resolution. It is impossible to communicate with individuals who are in a state of extreme emotional distress. You have the option to give them a shot, you can choose to slap them around or opt for something else as an alternative approach. You have the option to dispose of them in the rain and patiently wait for approximately 10 minutes for them to dry off completely. And then you can communicate with them, well, at least about something. You cannot talk to them today. The most unpleasant aspect for Western society is that their own society lacks the ability to engage in dialogue with them, which poses a significant challenge to effective communication and understanding. They do not want to have a serious conversation. They are unable to have a serious conversation because there are already a multitude of questions that they cannot, do not want to, and will not answer. And what options are available to you in this situation? To what location should an impoverished peasant with limited means and resources go in order to seek better opportunities, improved living conditions, and a chance for a more prosperous future? the Roman Empire during periods of decline, particularly in times of crisis, such as during the devastating plague outbreaks. There is a plethora of various phrases that can be utilized to describe the entirety of the whole picture in a comprehensive and complete manner. And I can confidently say for sure, with complete confidence, that it will only speed up. Considering the inescapable nature of the deepening economic crisis, its occurrence is currently underway and cannot be avoided due to the circumstances that have led to its development. And the quantity of issues is increasing, however. There are simply no solutions to these problems, and there will not be any. Simultaneously, a plethora of things, Well, for instance, envision a scenario where Argentina seizes the Falkland Islands tomorrow. In the past, Margaret Thatcher dispatched an entire fleet. At present, there is no guarantee that this fleet will reach its destination.
The island won't make it, even if we manage to put it together, even if it crawls there. Who said that by that time, Argentina won't have 2, 3, 4 hypersonic missiles to simply sink the British aircraft carriers? And then what?
And who was the person who stated that the Houthis would not have the capability to sink aircraft carriers in the Red Sea, due to the fact that they do not have hypersonic missiles in their possession?
But excuse me, if it is possible, in accordance with, to provide Ukraine with missiles to shoot down passenger planes on Russian territory, then what is preventing us from supplying missiles to the Houthis accordingly? Who stated that we are unable to do that? Is there any reason why we can't?
You yourself, in the Western sense, violated the system of international agreements. You all have accomplished it. However, if you deliberately broke this system, why did you genuinely believe that the other side would honor and abide by these agreements that were mutually agreed upon? By the way, for this reason, I am absolutely convinced that all American bases, both in the Middle East and in Europe, will have to leave soon enough. That is the reason why I do not really understand how the United States of America are going to take over the Southeast Asia region. Here is the complete trick. This is not a Japanese occupation. It is important to understand the distinction. The USA requires these 600 million individuals residing in Southeast Asia to collaborate with American markets in order to integrate them into the American way of life. And what would happen if you had Chinese drones flying all over the place, covering every corner of the sky? Are you certain you can halt these unmanned aerial vehicles? Or what is your current status? Where will you be hosting the American contingent? What are you going to do with the Chinese diaspora?
And so on and so forth. The problem is that there is no good answer anymore on how to save this Western liberal paradigm.
You have the ability to solve any particular question, for instance. An example would be the restoration of the industry of the United States of America. We possess the necessary resources to resolve the issue. The problem lies in the fact that if you depend on this particular resource, you will abruptly discover that there is a lack of resources for departing from the Middle East, departing from Western Europe, and departing from various other locations.
What will occur there, and who will assume responsibility? And the individuals who are expected to reach a conclusion today are unable to do so because they are confined to thinking within the framework of the outdated model, the old paradigm. They don't see at all how these tasks can be solved. I felt it really good. I have been stating for a while now that the sole opportunity the United States of America has is to assume control of the markets in Southeast Asia. I was extremely curious to see how quickly American experts would embrace and adopt this innovative concept. Paying attention without, those basic grounds that I had for it. I had those basic grounds for it, and they were the foundation of my understanding. But in the end, they agreed. I think that somewhere about 6 months ago, maybe even a little bit more, this model was accepted.
But here's the thing, like what she's requesting is a fundamental alteration in other aspects, not only economic ones, and individuals simply don't understand it like at all. Due to the lack of comprehension by others? Explain. Yeah, those folks who figured out that we got to take over Southeast Asia, they're like, guys, yeah, that's what we got to do. They are like, go ahead and do it. They're told resources are needed. They say, come on, how many resources do you need? We need all the resources we can get, including the ones you exist on. Other elite groups have made it clear that they will not give up their own, emphasizing their determination to stand firm and not back down. And that's it. That's the end of it. So we need to gradually wrap things up. In conclusion, what can I say? The system's strategic liberal economic model has come to an end. It cannot be saved. There is no chance of that happening. And in this situation, destruction is inevitable. And it won't be possible to jump over the abyss in 2 jumps. The current state of affairs leaves no room for optimism, as the system's strategic liberal economic model has reached its ultimate conclusion with no possibility of rescue. The impending destruction is unavoidable, and the notion of overcoming the abyss in 2 jumps is simply not feasible within this context. Initially, there is complete devastation, and solely after that, you are able to commence constructing something fresh on top of the ruins. In summary, I have a generally negative outlook on the overall situation that is currently unfolding. Well, she actually appears quite unattractive. I am uncertain if there is any feasible action that can be taken in this particular circumstance to at least minimally preserve and uphold the overall statehood. Well, and that's the end of our time. In the Russian economics studio was Mikhail Khazin.
Thanks for your attention. Goodbye.